So this is the latest image online showing the gathering of people, probably half of them parents and half of them journalists and onlookers in Batley in West Yorkshire. And the significant thing is that this is on the BBC online, so it will be kind of continued from today's front pages on the Times and the Daily Telegraph, the Boris graph. Now, the line that is being promoted by the opponents of the parents is that the protest is not genuine, that the protest has been hijacked. Now, this is a line that they tried on with the protests on the peaceful vigil and the mourners who gathered in Clapham in southwest London and were harassed and arrested by the police. And there was severe, kind of widespread disquiet at the behavior of the police and against the mainly women protesters and vigil participants and mourners. So when the sympathy for Sarah Everard and her distraught family and the fact that other women have been made unsafe and violently attacked in the streets, when the outrage at the behavior of the police reached very high level, the government tried to look for excuses, and the Conservatives successfully released the line that the Labour Party was exploiting the vigil and that others had come in and hijacked the vigil, including those who were opposed to lockdown. This is something that happens every single time there is a genuine protest against an unjust or oppressive event or policy or action in Britain, and I have seen this for a very long time. And this is typical, and this actually confirms the evidence that in Britain, the public policy and the establishment operate a completely dishonest kind of policy. While this is going on in Britain, right across the world, including in Russia, for example, there are protests going on. And the protests are being supported by the same Fleet Street papers in Britain who turned on the peaceful women and mourners that gathered to grieve for Sarah Everard. Now today, that is Friday, during Friday the 26th of March 2021, the BBC actually allowed a piece to be published online containing an interview, apart from other aspects. It's a kind of package, let's say. Interview with the parent of two girls who were murdered. And Mishal Hussain of the BBC was shown as interviewing the mother. And Mishal Hussain said that, well, Mishal Hussain asked the mother, whose daughters were murdered before Sarah Everard, some significant time before Sarah Everard. But the point that Mishal Hussain was addressing was whether the Metropolitan Police were told about the missing two girls, two young women. They're not kind of 16 or 17, they were older than that, but they were young women. And the mother told Mishal Hussain that, they were last seen or last kind of were in contact with when they were enjoying themselves, having a good time somewhere. The details of the place is not important at this point, but the question that Mishal Hussain asked this parent was whether she and her husband or partner, the father of the women, had given information to the Metropolitan Police about their being missing and their being not found and kind of heard from. And the parent said yes. And the parent added quite clearly that she and the family had to do the searching, and the police didn't search for these two girls or two women, young women. And the parents and the family, and if they had relatives, had to do the work and find the girls. Too late, but they found their bodies or found them. This is absolutely shocking. And the Fleet Street papers have not covered it, not in the way that they should have covered it. And I only came across this because I was searching, fact-checking, as usual. Whenever we do a broadcast or we do a publishing item of factual nature, we carry out several sets of fact checks, including contextually, we compare the various angles so that what we say is not kind of biased either way, and that is objectively objective. That is to say, it can be said by anyone looking at the facts objectively, and they don't have an agenda or don't have to have an agenda. The essential line here in comparing the two girls or two women that have been discussed, I'll actually look at the post that we actually included during the day, and we shall be doing this, but and just going back to Batley before we go to these parents. Anyone familiar with our posts on Twitter about Saida Warsi? Now, Saida Warsi is an English-born daughter of a Pakistani parents, and she is a member of the Conservative Party. Our absolutely consistent line about Saida Warsi has been that she is a dishonest, self-serving careerist, and that she has not been able to make the kind of headway in terms of careers due to her own particular unfitness. I'm not saying the unfitness has anything to do with her race or her faith or anything like that, but I'm saying that she is dishonest because she's jealous of other people in the region, in Yorkshire. She's from Yorkshire, and she was given a high profile, if you like, first time by the anti-Muslim. Remember what I'm saying, anti-Muslim David Cameron. And the fact that it was David Cameron who gave her a high profile is not an accidental event. Cameron wanted, they're doing the diversity. If you remember the diversity about this Arab Muslim young woman born and brought up in the USA, but she's American citizen by birth, just like Shamima Begum is citizen by birth. And she is the one that has been drawing attention to the racists at Black Rock, the asset confection organization operation that has got several trillion dollars worth of asset manipulation. So what Saida Warsi has been reportedly saying, notice what she's saying. She's completely dishonest because she's not saying that the protest has been hijacked by only the Muslim parents, or the hijack hasn't taken place only on the side of the Muslim parents or Muslim protesters. She's saying that it has been hijacked by extremists on both sides, and she's saying to fuel a culture war at the expense of kids and their learning. Now, this is not the first time that Saida Warsi has parasited herself and got into the mainstream news mentions on the back of other people's work. The kids and their learning is a very banal and kind of generic statement. It doesn't actually address the specific problems that bedevil schools in England. And this is common. Kids and learning, anyone can say that. And it's kind of, it's a spin that doesn't call on the person who making the spin to account for their own intervention. So Saida Warsi is exploiting the situation by abusing the fact that she has a high profile and she has got connections with the conservatives. So she's kind of barged in and has undermined the actual core of the protest. Now, as we have said in part A, the people who are protesting are absolutely entitled to protest, but we have gone to some extent, some length about the Muslim descended, English-born rapists and gangsters who have targeted mainly white girls. And we have accused the Muslim community in Yorkshire North of failing to speak up against that kind of behavior and for the children, that the white girls that have been multiply exploited and their lives destroyed. So we don't have to apologize for attacking Warsi in the way that we are doing in this part 2 or part B, because Warsi has not done the protest. Secondly, Warsi is actually echoing the Tory line, which has been given more prominence to with the frontage of the racist and the corrupt Community Secretary Robert Jenricks, who has surfaced and condemned the parents. And they're giving this liar very prominent exhibition by the BBC. This is the BBC item, all of it. Now, the reason for the protest is that the Prophet of Islam, peace be on him, hasn't got any image. Full stop. No image can be his image. And yet, Jenrick, the moron, is saying that teachers should be allowed to include the Prophet's image appropriately. He's missing the point. So the BBC, by giving him that kind of prominence, are actually repeating the violation against which the parents are protesting. That is to say, put an image of the Prophet. That is it. It doesn't matter in Islamic theology and Islamic history. It doesn't matter who the source of the image is. It matters whether an image has been inserted or not. No image can be inserted in the faith. According to the faith, it's not an extremist position. It's a faith position, very moderate and ongoing for 1400 years or so. So for Saida Warsi, pretending to be a Muslim and echoing the line of the Boris Johnson cabal and supporting the very wrong against which the parents are protesting. That is to say, show to the children an image of the Prophet. That's it. That is the wrong. And they're all getting it wrong. And the BBC is coming across as being corrupt, racist, anti-Muslim, insensitive, ignorant and stupid as usual. And all of them are idiotic. The whole front page treatment of the item on the Telegraph is totally corrupt. The Telegraph should not be running all of its front page giving credit to Gavin Williamson, who is an idiot. And I'm not saying he's the idiot. The whole Fleet Street has been calling him an idiot for the whole of the last year. And this is continuing. So when it comes to attacking Muslims, basic, internationally, objectively acknowledged right to religion or religious belief, all these people who are otherwise not necessarily in agreement with them automatically converge and become united in ignorantly and without checking the facts, condemning the Muslims, just on the basis that the Muslims dared to mount a protest. Remember, the protest has been also the reason for the people in Bristol to mount a kind of campaign, physical campaign, including attacking some police stations in the last week. And again, the Conservatives and the Fleet Street have said that the Bristol protest was hijacked. Wherever there is a protest, it is a hijack, as long as the protest is against the Conservatives. And that is a lie. And that is why we say and we do what we say and we do in the introduction, in the presentation, that this particular program, this slot, the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, is literally that. There is nobody else doing this. No channel, no outlet, no station, no organization, no matter how big they are or whatever. This is the only organization that is doing it. And we are doing it on the highest possible intellectual, ethical, moral, and evidential grounds and level. Anything we say, and we say a lot of the things that are very outspoken, anything we say is thoroughly fact-checked, evidence-based, and legal, and lawful, and universal. And we are doing this to aid the actual education of the person or persons who are viewing it. If you notice the viewers' stats, you will find that there has been only 1 or 2 viewers. That is intentional. We don't want to make friends, follow friends or invite friends. And the reason why we don't do that is because we don't believe that thousands and thousands and thousands of commenters or followers will add anything substantial at all. What is of substance and what is centrally of substantial importance is that we put the substance on the record and it's available. Any search produces thousands or hundreds of kind of results. So therefore, it's not like an obscure end. It is World Wide Web and it is there. And we are keen to get the facts right. Nobody else is getting the facts right. Let's move on to the point about these protests. There are three protests that we have referred to. One is the protest going on now in West Yorkshire, Batley in West Yorkshire, which is an obscure place, but it is a place that has significant numbers of Muslim population, especially those coming from Pakistan. And those people, the Pakistani originated migrant settlements, are very much in the traditional sense. They're not people that came politically. These are people that came from various parts of the country, Pakistan, but a significant numbers of them were from the Kashmir, let's say, and Punjab. Some maybe from other provinces, from Northwest Frontier Province and Pashtun or whatever. But essentially, these people came to the now defunct factories in the English North and English Yorkshire. And that is why whenever there are some references to Muslims in those parts, those references take the references back to Pakistan. And Saida Warsi is from Pakistani parents, and Sajid Javid is a child of Pakistani parents. Now, these two are the only two conservative members or conservative careerists with a Pakistani background. They're born here, but they're from Pakistani background. And we have to get the name right about Argentina. See the Argentina, and it is the reason, the context is to substantiate a description of Sajid Javid as a coconut. That's what I'm going to do. Or coconut or a Mir Zafar. Mir Zafar is the one that is linked with the 1757 East India Company bribing Mir Zafar Ali Khan, who was the general in the army of Nawab Sirajuddaulah. And Mir Zafar was used by Robert Clive, and after he used it and after he began the kind of settlement of the British Raj, he got rid of Mir Zafar Ali Khan and his gang. And I'm looking for Argentina because there is only in Argentina that an accurate Mir Zafar can be found, so that we can refer to Sajid Javid as a Mir Zafar, not just as a coconut, but as a Mir Zafar in effect. Because Sajid Javid is the one that has behaved like Robert Clive and taken away the citizenship of Shamima Begum. Okay, so we come to Argentina and see who the people have been in power. So in Argentina, they're saying that 96.7% of the people are European or mestizo, 2.4% are American Indian, 0.5% Asian, 0.4% African. Now it's in the 0.4% of the population that either a Syrian or an Iraqi was the president of Argentina for a while. Let me just look for him and find his name. If it is mentioned in the entry. So if it is not mentioned in the entry, we shall do another different kind of search. Right. This criminal, Carlos Menem, this criminal in Argentina said, or did, he was from a Muslim background, from the Middle East, but he became a Christian, Menem. And he expressly became a Christian in order to further his career. And let's see this entry, what he says. So he was in post for 10 years, let's say, just over 10 years. 8th of July 1989 to 10th of December 1999. And let's see if the entry mentions the fact that he became a Christian. So it says early life and education in the entry. Carlos Saul Menem was born in 1930 in Anilejo, a small town in the mountainous north of La Rioja province, Argentina. And he said that his parents, Saul Menem and Mohib Akil, were Syrian nationals from Yabrud, who had emigrated to Argentina. He attended elementary and high school in La Rioja and joined a basketball team during his university studies. He visited Buenos Aires in 1951 with his team and met the president Juan Perón and his wife Eva Perón. This influenced Menem to become a Peronist. After President Juan Perón's overthrow in 1955, Menem was briefly incarcerated. He later joined the successor of the Peronist party, the Justicialist Party. He was elected president of its La Rioja province in 1973. In that capacity, he was included in the flight to Spain that brought Perón back to Argentina after his long exile. According to the Peronist politician Juan Menem Abdal Medina, Menem played no special part in the event. So there is no headline referring to his changing from Syrian Muslim to Argentinian Christian. But I read reports at the time when he was in active politics that he had become a Christian in order to advance his career or support his career. Now, there may be a mention of this in detailed documentation, which I shall check. But at this point, I'm saying this, that he changed his religion corruptly in order to further his career or entrench his career, subject to the fact that later actual references will be added to our online post about this particular individual and this comment. Now, that is exactly what happens with the coconuts, the likes of Sajid Javid. Remember, we are talking about Shamima Begum, who is only in the news in the way that she is, because Sajid Javid, the British Carlos Menem, took away her citizenship by birth. Now, today's coverage online include various references, including or the references online that we have checked before coming live on this program, contain one on the Daily Mail online, which has got a number of about 4 pictures of Shamima Begum dressed in what they call Western kind of dress. I mean, I'm not going into the details of the description of the dress, but what they're saying is that she's kind of making up these things. And one website in India, or based in India, said that her latest kind of allegation or claim in justification for her going to Syria, joining the IS, include the fact that her mother didn't love her enough, or she didn't have a close relationship with her mother. Now remember what Sharmina, in the entry about Sharmina Begum with similar name, the Sharmina Begum is the one that who went to Syria in December 2014, 2.5 months before Shamima and her 2 friends were published in the news as having crossed into Syria. And the entry in the Wikipedia about Sharmina refers to the fact that these 3 girls actually met not long after getting into Syria themselves. We shall not elaborate on that meeting and the time and whatever, because what we are talking about now about Shamima is more substantial than that meeting. We have said in part A in some extra detail this morning that Sharmina was directly groomed, targeted by elements, including 2 women that are described in the Wikipedia entry as members of the Sisters Forum, whatever that is. But then the Wikipedia entry goes on to link that Sisters Forum to the thing called Islamic Forum Europe. Now, we don't know any more details about any of that except that entry. Now, what today's kind of revelation, wherever this is coming from, will be, of course, confirmed later by various publications, because they are on the story and they are kind of depicting Shamima Begum as being engaged in a process of a series of changes she is putting on herself, her appearance, her clothing, and her statements. So it's an ongoing dynamic process, her appearance and her statements. Both the appearance and her statements are about kind of communicating to generally the public in Britain that she wasn't really a threat to national security, that she was not there as a violent person, and she didn't go there as a violent person, and all those things. We are not kind of speaking on her behalf whatsoever. What we are saying is that in presenting the updates, we are putting in together the latest published items and giving a rational kind of interpretation. Now, the purpose seems to be whoever is kind of aware that she is doing it, or whoever is helping her to do it. We are not saying that anyone else is helping her, but we are saying that it is possible. Even if no one else is helping her, or no one else is involved in the makeovers and the Western dress and the photographs as published on the Mail online, these photographs are very, very different from the photographs that have been shown of Shamima Begum in the months after she appeared in the first photograph and films reports in February 2015. Now, what is happening here in the statement, the latest statement that we have come across today, Friday, 26th of March 2021, is that she had not been loved by her mother. I'm using the term loved in the usual sense of the parent and the child. Now, this is something that until this today had not been seen, not by us anyway. And we cannot speculate because we have absolutely no connection with her parents, either in Bangladesh, which is where her father is, or her mother, who is supposed to be in Britain, or with any other member of the family, including any siblings. We know that one of the outlets has given a picture of Shamima Begum wearing a schoolgirl uniform, and that picture being held to the camera by her elder sister. That is the description that we have seen, not anything else. So we don't have any connection with any of her family, any relations, anything. All we are doing is two things. One is to digest the latest publications or references to her from third parties, which we are accessing by the general kind of process of objective research. And the other is the main one that we are focusing on, which is the legal and other offenses that the Towners Council has committed by neglecting Shamima Begum and the other three girls when they needed the help and when they were all children, and at the very critical time when they were targeted. Remember what he said about the targeting. According to the Wikipedia entry, we are saying that they were targeted by people, including two women described as the Sisters Forum members, which is also described as being an operation of the Islamic Forum Europe, the operation being done from the East London Mosque in Whitechapel Road, London E1. That is all we have seen about those connections. And by the contents of the rest of the entry, it is very clear that those two women were among the groomers of these girls. At least, most certainly, they were the groomers of Shamima Begum. And we are saying that whatever the number of people that were included in the grooming of these Shamima Begum should have been thoroughly and exhaustively investigated by the prosecuting and national security agencies. There is no reference to any of that having taken place in the Wikipedia entry, so we don't know whether that was done or not. So we go back to the safeguarding children duties. This is not a kind of extraordinary thing. Safeguarding children duties include anything that is in need of action to safeguard children from danger. Let's put it that way. So what these protests in Batley, this protest in Batley is doing, this is the Times of today, Friday the 26th of March 2021. And these parents are from Pakistani background. In the mainly Pakistani background, there may be people from other Muslim kind of countries or regions. And they are actually saying, these parents are saying, not necessarily chapter and verse, but this is what they're effectively saying, that by violating the Islamic faith, Muslim faith, which is that, the Prophet has no image. By showing the image, so-called, and that image, according to the reports, was the one that was one of the images published a few years ago by the French magazine Charlie Hebdo. So remember what Charlie Hebdo has been doing recently. In the last fortnight, Charlie Hebdo was condemned by the Fleet Street papers, as well as by the other hangers-on and lackeys of the British royal family. Because they said that Charlie Hebdo, by running a cartoon showing Brenda, that is the Queen Elizabeth II, riding on the neck of Meghan Markle, who was saying she can't breathe, in almost parallel way as the Minneapolis in USA, black man was strangled to death by a white policeman sitting on his neck. And George, this victim, complaining that he can't breathe. Now, that was an actual fact which has been used by the French magazine Charlie Hebdo to create a parody that captures the various controversies and various kind of allegations of racism made by Meghan Markle, backed by Harry, in their interview broadcast by CBS and interview conducted by Oprah Winfrey. When that Charlie Hebdo cartoon appeared, the British Fleet Street were absolutely outraged. They were more outraged against Charlie Hebdo than the Batley Muslim parents have shown their outrage against the teacher at the Batley Grammar School. Think about that for a minute. So what we are diagnosing is a state of hysteria that is totally disproportionate and untruthful and completely dishonest and brazenly intolerant of the Muslims. Now, having said all of this in the last few minutes, it is reasonable to conclude that in her manipulative entry into the debate, the so-called Muslim peer, Saida Warsi, who is, of course, a licensed law trading solicitor, but she is not soliciting the fundamental human rights of the parents to mount a lawful protest against anything wrong that they think is being inflicted on their children at the school. Saida Warsi is doing a brazen, crafty, cunning hijack so that she can come across to the racists in Fleet Street and the media as being the good Muslim that can be acceptable in relation to the bad Muslims who have the audacity to say that they have rights which must be respected. Those parents didn't hijack anything. Now, this term of hijacking, when used by a Muslim stooge, or a stooge who is a Muslim one in Britain today, this reminds of the serial attempts by Nazir Afzal of the Midlands, who is kind of poisonously promoted in terms of his image by the racist Fleet Street and their allies like Ian Dunt and Paul Waugh and others who run political websites. These are actually extensions of Fleet Street. So these parasites aided Nazir Afzal's parasitic behavior. And Nazir Afzal said that the protest in Birmingham against Muslim children being taught about homosexuality had been hijacked by some kind of undetailed hijackers. The only hijack suggestion that stuck about the Birmingham one was about an activist person who is indeed suspicious and who indeed might have his own particular agenda. But he was not the main protest. The main protest consisted of ordinary Muslim parents in Birmingham. So even if that hijack-oriented self-server were present, that didn't diminish the legal rights of the original parents that did actually protest and want to protest against the particular curriculum or particular syllabus, whatever. So you can see the appearance of this tag, hijack, is lodged around the genuine protesters in order to undermine the protesters' authenticity. As I said, in the case of the vigils, the peaceful vigil and the mourners for Sarah Everard, the opponents of the protests, including police spokespersons and conservative MPs and conservatives, were keen to undermine the strength and the genuineness and the humanity and the serious widespread support behind the original grieving kind of vigil participants. So that is the pattern, but the pattern is there. They say hijack, it has been hijacked. Now, as a long time ongoing campaigner myself, organizer campaigns, anyone, I've successfully organized many campaigns and I'm still doing campaigns. Now this is part of the campaign, remember? And there is absolutely nothing illegal or wrong if any number of people come and support, whatever the motivation. I cannot read what their individual agenda might be for supporting any campaign, any street rally, issuing a statement, whatever there is. Because, for example, there was one in 2006 during the height of the Khoodeelaar campaign against Crossrail, against our Hrs Council, and against the BBC and all the other in the Parliament and Minister. Just before the May 2006 council election, there was one candidate for election to the council who craftily got on air with the ethnicity-linked television channel or channels and managed to kind of dropped the word Khoodeelaar. He had no contact with us. He did not consult with us. And he most certainly did not take part in any action that the Khoodeelaar campaign took part in. He parasited himself. He kept mentioning Khoodeelaar in his letters to the East London Idiotizer or in his comments on the ethnicity-linked corrupt Channel S. Khoodeelaar. Now, Khoodeelaar is so well known in the community that it doesn't need any explanation. This is the most well-known political word anywhere among the Bangladeshi community. No other word, single word, carries the instant communicability and expressiveness that Khoodeelaar has. So anyone could use the word, which this one did. And people did read their comments or statements as being sympathetic or supportive of Khoodeelaar. Now, we couldn't go and check every single one and their detailed internal intent. So that's what has happened in Batley, West Yorkshire. And that was what happened in Birmingham. Now, in addition to Nazir Afzal, there was another racist who was an anti-Muslim, who really didn't want any protest to take place, let alone by the hijackers, and it's Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips was a local Birmingham MP. She still is. And she repeatedly, racistly, and illegally made various unsubstantiated assertions against the protest, against the parents, against the protesters. And so therefore, when she said in the wake of the vigil and the vigil being attacked by the police, vigil for Sarah Everard that is, that every day more than 100 women got raped and most of the rapists got away. Nobody actually quizzed her as to the veracity of that. It's not that she shouldn't be allowed to give the numbers. What it is that if she gives a number like that, then she has to be held to account for her source and for the evidence in detail about every single victim of every single rape. What am I saying here is that people like Jess Phillips, who are given mainstream, main kind of platforms, which they abuse by telling lies, and they're the ones that are routinely given mainstream platforms to attack Muslims, when Muslims in the context of the particular protest and representation are only observing the legal right and entitlement to protest. And in the references to all these hijacking and anti-protesters narrative from Fleet Street and Mainstream and the BBC, there has never been, and I mean this and I repeat this, never been any real significant acknowledgement of the UK's international law obligations directly resulting from the status of the UK as signatory to the international treaties and obligations. Let's go back to 2006 and today. Today is the anniversary, 26th of March 2006 to 26th of March 2021. Now, this is about 15 years, right? Let's say 14 years, 14 to 15 years. During the month of March 2006, the Khoodeelaar campaign carried out a series of high-octane strategic events from Brick Lane. And one of the evidence was the inclusion of an interview, short interview, very short, but an interview with me and another one parallel done at the same time with K. Jordan on the BBC's Sunday program. 26th of March 2006 was a Sunday. And that interview was included in the package. In the package shown on the London segment of the politics show on the BBC One. And it featured, of course, K. Jordan and myself. And it had other people talking about the cross-trail hole and the campaign that we were mounting. We had been engaged in opposing at the time. It was because of our campaign that the others were brought into the studio. And what they said amounted to their serving their interests, including the then still in situ, in place, MP for Bethnal Green and Bow, George Galloway. Now, Galloway in 2006 was still on our list because we were giving him platform to speak. And we shall not be repeating everything we have said about him in the past, except to say, and emphatically say, that we saved his political career. I saved his political career. Why? Because despite his reported claim to the Andrew Gilligan for the program Dispatches that Gilligan broadcast on the 1st of March 2010, that was 4 years later, George Galloway said that there were unnamed thugs who would do serious damage to him if he said anything about the Islamic Forum Europe or whatever. As I said, we don't know what Islamic Forum Europe is. We know that that name is mentioned, but we don't know who that organization is or how it is run in any democratic, accountable way. But as far as George Galloway's estimation of the East End is concerned, or was concerned, those thugs carried more political substance than the legitimate political campaign that we do. Now, he has got all entitlements to say that. But does what Galloway said to Andrew Gilligan or Ted Jory pass the test of veracity? Is it true or is it false? The only way to check the veracity is by looking at the evidence. From the time that I told Lutfur Rahman on Friday the 29th of October 2010 that he must immediately sit down with me and listen to me about the very serious corruption going on in Tower Hamlets Council, and he must not take part in any corruption ongoing, etc., etc. From that onwards, I maintained regular, every week, if not more often, communications to Lutfur Rahman. Up to the, let's say, very last period, which is sometime in 2015, when he became physically unable to exist in any manageable administrative way. And I said the same thing as I'm saying now. I'm saying that he was doing the wrong thing by ignoring the dangers that were looming and the wrong things that were going on. We know now, after all the evidence that, not all the evidence that exists, but all the evidence that have so far been publicly accessible, resulting from the fact that they were either included in the cause for the petitioners or they were part of the other debates. One was the Price Waterhouse accounts, one was the Secretary of State's information, and the other was, of course, the row between Lutfur Rahman and the Panorama program. Now, we are not an agent or extension or a contract of Panorama or John Ware, who was the presenter. But essentially, all the evidence shows, despite the various kind of variations in the versions given by various sources about what Lutfur Rahman did and what he didn't do, it is a common point of agreement based on all these diverse and various sources or varying sources of information about the 6 years. October 2010 up to 23rd of April 2015. So 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There are 6 calendar years. And just as I had spent about 6 years or 5 years, whatever it was, let's say from 1981 to 1986, or after that, until after the GLC was actually abolished, in order to monitor, investigate, and interrupt the corrupt regime of Ken Livingstone for evidence. I did the same thing with Tower Hamlets Council and its corruption. And there are names, chapter, verses, dates. Like I spoke to Lutfur Rahman on Friday the 29th of October 2010. I spoke to Lutfur Rahman twice on Tuesday the 15th of February 2011. And I spoke to Lutfur Rahman on Thursday the 20th of September 2012. And then I spoke to Lutfur Rahman on the 6th of May 2010, polling day. And I spoke to Lutfur Rahman on absolutely dozens of other dates during those 6 calendar years. And I spoke to Alibor Chaudhry. Anyone who doesn't know Alibor Chaudhry, Alibor, Alibor, Chaudhry, spelled any way you like. And you look it up. And you look it up in a check with Richard Morey, the election commissioner's ruling of the 23rd of April 2015. And I spoke to Alibor Chaudhry, and I communicated to Alibor Chaudhry series of clear, factual communications warning Lutfur Rahman that he was going to disgrace the community, allow the crooks to harm the community, and words to that effect. Now, I found that Lutfur Rahman was, contrary to the image that has been created of him by all the white ones, either those who support him or those who don't support him. Lutfur Rahman was intellectually lacking. He is as intellectually challenged as Jeremy Corbyn was for that post. What I assume to be very standard intellectual concepts and communications, and I thought that they would be understood by Lutfur Rahman, they went over his head. And despite the fact that Alibar Chaudhry told me on dozens, if not hundreds of occasions, that he, Alibar Chaudhry, was communicating all the evidence and contents and documents and warnings and evidence that I had been writing and making available to Alibar Chaudhry on the continuous renewed authorization and assurance to me that Alibar Chaudhry was the person who was communicating with me on Lutfur Rahman's behalf directly. Contrary to all of those assurances, Alibar Chaudhry, after a year, 18 months after Lutfur Rahman was ousted, and Alibar Chaudhry was banned as a councillor for 5 years, Alibar Chaudhry told me in clear terms in Brick Lane, I was coming south from the north and Alibar was going northwards from the south in Brick Lane, and the meeting took place not far from the junction of Brick Lane and the Bethnal Green Road, near one of the Jewish shops. And Alibar Chaudhry said, the first thing he said, and the only substantial thing he said to me, it was not a long conversation, but he did say to me that Baisab, Colin didn't want to help you. Now, Colin is the crook, racist criminal, Colin Cormack. And we are not going to go into the details of what he didn't want to be. Colin Cormack lied, and I told Lutfur Rahman that Colin Cormack was lying. But the fact that at a meeting that I had organized between me and Colin Cormack and Lutfur, also attended by Alibar Chaudhry, Lutfur begged Colin Cormack in front of me, effectively. And Colin Cormack was not holding a position that gave him that right at all, that he should be pleaded to by the executive mayor at the time. So Lutfur Rahman was openly incapable of even understanding his position. That is number one. Number two, or he was a sicker liar and beiman than he pretended to be. He could not be both. Because if he was a sicker liar, then of course he understood what his administrative, internal, executive location was or locus was in relation to any of the employees in the council. And in which case he should have ordered Cormack to do what was the right thing to do instead of begging him. How dare Lutfur Rahman do that in front of me against my advice? Does he know, and I'm saying this in the knowledge that he might watch this, does he know that I gave him benefit of the doubt every time? I never conspired about him. I'm still not conspiring about him. I'm saying to him straight that he should not have lied. It's not an agenda I'm doing. This is what I do, and this is what makes the difference. Lutfur Rahman lied to me every time. Why did he lie? What did he have to hide? And all his kind of reassurances repeated to me by Alibar on his behalf were lies. Because if Alibod told me that Colin Cormack was lying, Alibod told me after the event, long after the event, but he did, then he was only confirming what I had been telling Lutfur and Alibod right from the beginning about Colin Cormack being a liar. And it goes back way before either of them became a councillor or came anywhere near councillor. I had been dealing with the same criminal, racist liar, Colin Cormack, from the middle of the 1990s. So anyone watching this and thinking that, well, why is this presenter calling these so many people liars? My answer is that it's not because there is no other word to describe them, but this is the evidence. And it is a unique set of evidence because I have been uniquely active and engaged for a very long time against criminals in councils, criminals in government departments, criminals in parliament, criminals in the media, and criminals, stooges, operating in the community as well. So that is the evidential reason that I say somebody is a criminal, not because I am limited or challenged in my vocabulary. And liar and lying and lies and lie, these are concepts that are universally understood. So they don't need further elaboration except to say that in the actual challenge, in the testing of the veracity, truthfulness of one particular statement about somebody being a liar, it may be necessary to use other words and phrases. But the image that I am representing of these crooks and criminals, that image is coming across because I'm saying that Lutfur Rahman has been a liar on the evidence. And that Lutfur Rahman would be a liar was one of the most distinct possibilities when I said in January 2010 that we should oppose the elected mayor post because whoever would be supported by the main kind of groups in the Bangladeshi community and end up being the incumbent in that post would include someone like Lutfur Rahman. Not that in January 2010 I knew Lutfur Rahman would be a candidate at all, but I knew that someone like Lutfur Rahman would become a candidate and would become installed. Now, as I said before, not today, when discussing the case of the 11-year-old Bangladeshi child Nasima Begum, not Shamima Begum, Nasima Begum, aged 11, she was murdered by negligence of the Royal London Hospital and the London Ambulance Service. And her father, after the death, of course, approached me to help the family get some justice for the child. And I don't know the extent of any further communications they have had with the government. But up to the point where I was still in contact with the family, I had secured the removal of the Secretary of State, Virginia Bottomley, under pressure. I didn't get a written confirmation that it was because of my campaign, but it happened. So that is one. And the other is the pressure I created to have the London Ambulance Service investigated. These are the two things that I did over the period of within a short time, 2-3 months. Contacts with the family continued after that, but the substantive work had been done. So it was during that first month of my contact with the family of the child, I asked Lutfur Rahman to formally formally become the licensed law trader on the case, and he bluntly said no. The fact that he said bluntly no and didn't say a single word about the family, about the 11-year-old child that had been killed by the negligent ambulance service in the Royal London Hospital, summed him up. He was a calculating, cruel, unfeeling individual. That's what he was. So that is what I knew he would be doing. 15 years later, when I opposed the imposition of the elected mayor, because if he did become one of the candidates, then he would destroy the community's image, and that is what he did. Now, it is reported that he has been allowed to peddle the lie that he did nothing wrong. Well, the list of wrongs that Lutfur Rahman has done is not a fantasy list. The list of wrongs that Lutfur Rahman did while he was imposed as the incumbent kind of mayor in the name of the people of Tower Hamlets, the list is contained in the following. So there are 12,000 results that I'm looking at. Not all of the individual results are about him, obviously, because where the algorithm works, similar names are included. Either full names or parts of the names are included in the results. So there are 12,000. If I put my name in the search, it is like 2 million plus. But not every one of the 2 million is about me, Muhammad Haq. It's about one part of my name and another most of the times. But there are about few hundred thousand kind of items that are about me. And it applies to everyone. So in the first of the results, Lutfur Rahman has got an entry on the Wikipedia. And then Hrs Rahman found guilty of election. What is it saying? As the Independent is saying, this piece by Kahal Milmo, dated the Monday the 27th of April 2015 at 17:25, it says, the election for the post of mayor of Tower Hamlets will be rerun after the judgment. And the main heading is, Tower Hamlets Mayor Lutfur Rahman found guilty of election corruption and barred from office. Now, he says, according to the kind of boasts being published on his behalf by certain individuals, Lutfur Rahman is saying that he did nothing wrong. Now, I would say that this headline is a very serious item of evidence against him. And I have not seen any evidence that he has forced the publisher, the Independent, to withdraw this statement or to amend it or to apologize to him for it. The central point is corruption, election corruption. Now, we shall not be talking about the role of the Metropolitan Police in this part, but we'll be talking in later parts. So if he was 49 years old in 2015, Then 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20, 6 calendar years later, he's 55 years old. Now, Luther Rahman, as a corrupt person, should have challenged this in a court of law. And he has no record of challenging the ruling by Richard Morey, which is the source of the independent peace by Cahill Milmo. And the list that Richard Morey published on the 23rd of April 2015 accuses Luther Rahman of being dishonest. Richard Morey actually goes to some length to say that Luther Rahman stayed silent, and it was very, very revealing that he stayed silent. But he also said that he was not found to have behaved apparently with any discourtesy. And then he says that all the questions, all the evidence that he had seen amounted to his conclusion that he made. And he also said that Luther Rahman did serious damage to the reputation and the interests of the Bangladeshi community. I'm saying to Luther Rahman or whoever is running him that he behaved with disgraceful discourtesy to the community, and he must apologize to the community. That is nothing to do with him being allowed to remain hopeful that he will become mayor again. That is not the point. The point is he owes a big apology to the community. Bangladeshi community first, wider electors second, and the whole public in the UK third. If he has done that, then I need to see when he did that, but I don't see any evidence of him having done that. When I stopped Lutfer Rahman opposite 164 Brick Lane, London E1, 6RU, that is the postcode. Lutfer Rahman came out of the taxi. I was standing opposite the 164 Brick Lane, and he stopped the taxi and came out right in front of me. And he said, "Why are you taking my pictures?" Now, I had been taking his pictures for evidence, full stop, not because of him, but because of the context, and I've been taking pictures. I mean, if he is 55 years old now, I've been taking pictures for longer than 55 years, let's say. And I am a photojournalist, and I'm an investigative journalist, and I'm an international law investigator, advocate. Quite apart from any of that, I am fascinated by the craft of photography. I'm interested in photography, and I have been ever since I got introduced to photography in my home by one of my uncles. Of course, I had two uncles who were keen photographers, but the one that I saw in action first was a better one in terms of the techniques and the various settings and so on. And I have taken some of the best photographs anyone has taken of the subjects that I have taken. And taking pictures of a Tower Hamlets councillor or Tower Hamlets person in the street was not exceptional. And the other thing especially is that if I had a picture of Lutfur Rahman to go with the actual narrative, then that is the basic kind of information that should be provided to the reader, the observer, the researcher, whoever. And on the 15th of February, 2011, which was a Tuesday, I did take Lutfur Rahman's picture, and it's probably 1 minute long video which is on the YouTube, which has been on YouTube. And in that video, one of the criminals walking with him was not behaving like a criminal towards me. He was like grinning, like for my approval, and saying to Lutfur Rahman that I was there. He was pointing. I was taking the film of them coming towards the film, towards the camera. And this idiot was saying to Lutfur, who was in the middle, that I was there. He should speak to me. Lutfur Rahman said, "We have talked." I mean, that is the simplest translation of the word or words he said to him. He said, "Ma to ise." Now, that was an ungrateful Lutfur Rahman. Because remember, it was only months after he became installed. So he was beginning to develop a big head. Instead of stopping and saying a full sentence, he said, "Ma to ise." He wanted to get away as fast as possible. Now, the one on the left of him had already diverged and crossed the road and got into the taxi that was waiting there with full meter on. And that one was the criminal liar, Aman Dalby. So this is the power of my journalism. I don't make up things, and I have not made up things ever. There is no need for making up anything, because the telling of the truth is the most powerful challenge, and I do that. And because I do that, I told Lutfur Rahman not to damage the work that I had done for the creation of the image of the Bangladeshis as a dignified people. That's what he did. Does he know that I didn't notice that he was being put in the mayor post on the back of the campaigns that I do and I had done? Did he think that I had not made the connection? I had made the connection, and I come from a very big, generous background. I don't envy anyone. And I was quite happy for anyone, Lutfur Rahman or whoever, if they did behave legitimately, honestly, with dignity, and did the community the necessary service, then I had no problem with them. But I knew that I would have problems, so I kept contacting him or trying to tell him that he was doomed. This is the month, and this is the week, actually, 4 days after 22nd of March today. And on 22nd of March 2011, I spoke at a gathering held in memory of K. Jordan in the meeting hall in the Great Urek Street. I spoke there maybe 1 minute or even less than a minute. I couldn't speak for long. It is extremely emotional, very raw emotion, because up to the time that Kay left us at the end of December 2010, we had worked very closely for the best part of 9 years. And Kay Jordan was the colleague that I never had before, who actually understood the agenda, the topic, the need, and the work. And she understood instantly, no need to explain anything, just statement. And we were like working. I mean, she was working like 14, 15 hours or so, 16 hours. And I work even longer. And we stopped the attack on Crossrail Hole, attack on the Brick Lane area, and more. And she never told me in all of that time of any serious, well, she was not well in terms of weakness and kind of getting exhausted and all these things, which were the things that she told me because I was wondering why she hadn't contacted me or something. But there was no statement ever that she had any more serious illness. That is all I can remember. So that is the reason I didn't speak more than 1 minute or 1.5 minutes on the 22nd of March 2011. That is her birthday. And the people that gathered there were not gathered or listed by me. It was other people who got them together. Now, among the people there, Lutfur wasn't there. Abbasuddin alias Halal wasn't there. No councillor was there that I can remember. The only people from the kind of Bangladeshi mix of the population was me and a number of others that were employed by the SSB or in the SSBA. If there was anyone else that I have missed, I can check and add that for factual accuracy later. The reason I'm saying this, there was one person who I filmed and his video I have put on online, who is an ex-councillor, but I didn't consider him as a councillor because he had long since been inactive in terms of the council. So essentially, what that meeting actually showed, and the fact that I was asked to speak at all, because I was not part of the others organizing the meeting. I was very much different from the others. And if they could get away with it, they would have pretended that this meeting wasn't taking place and they would have left me out of it. Because everything they have done since has been against what Kay Jordan was doing for the community. And everything they have done has so damaged the community that no one in their right minds would allow anyone to do a fraction of the damage that they've done in the period since 22nd of March 2011 up to now. And Lutfur Rahman was one of the participants in the criminality, in the sense that the criminality was done by those I've mentioned and by the council's employees concerned. And Lutfur Rahman repeatedly lied, knowing full well that damage, irreparable damage, was being done. And he lied because he wanted the damage to be continued. The damage to be continued to be done, inflicted. And I have mentioned these names before, but I'll mention just for the context for this particular edition. One is Maulana Shamsul Haq. Anyone who knows about the community knows that Maulana is a kind of common title that is given to people who are kind of supposed to be learned in Islam and Islamic faith and so on. And it covers quite a number of religious skills and knowledge. So Maulana Shamsul Haq is one. And at the time, 2012, when the SSBA, criminals associated with the SSBA, Community Trust and SSBA organization, were carrying out the damage and the attacks on the Kitten's house in, let's say, July and August and September 2012. About that time, Maulana Shamsul Haq was given information that very serious damage was being done with the participation of Tower Hamlets Council. And Maulana Shamsul Haq promised to raise that at the meeting of the Tower Hamlets Council of Mosques, due to meet in the first week of October 2012. Now, he gave an email address to which all the key summaries were sent for their information. And he suggested that the same should be sent by email to other member kind of mosques, which was done. And he was sent many reminders, and he never acknowledged receipt, and he never answered, and he never explained why he didn't keep his word. And it took a number of years of silence by Maulana Shamsul Haq and the Tower Hamlets Council of Mosques. It's not to be confused with the council, Tower Hamlets Council. It's all the mosques and their association. And by mosques is meant the very small numbers of men that control the access to the mosque building and the access to the mosque generally by the people who say the prayers, essentially, who are collectively called musallis. That is to say, the collection of people who say the salat. Musallis, that is the plural. And this Shamsul Haq had made a clear promise that he would raise the issue and come back with the resultant answer. He never did. And he was sent at least another 10 reminders. No answer, no communication. And during that duration of his silence, at least one meeting took place at the same East London Mosque where Sharmina was brainwashed by these two women, Sisters Forum. At least one meeting of the Council of Mosques of Tower Hamlets took place somewhere in that East London Mosque complex. And it had Maulana Shamsul Haq and it had Lutfur Rahman as a guest in the picture. So even if at that time, Shamsul Haq was not communicating any acknowledgement, receipt, or reply. It was independently verifiable that he had met Lutfur Rahman. Now, we then leave the year 2013 because by that time we are already in the next year 2013, and we move to other things that were happening. Inter-Armed Council, while the damages were being done, continued. A man who was employed as the chief reporter at the so-called Channel S at the time, and the Channel S was one of the outlets, ethnicity-linked outlets, that were carrying completely false and misleading plugs for Lutfur Rahman, who was in situ, that is to say, he was in place as the elected mayor in the borough. So this one was designated as chief reporter of the Channel S, while he was also, it came, by the time Lutfur Rahman was kicked out as the incumbent mayor by Richard Morey on the 23rd of April 2015, this person is younger than Lutfur Rahman, or if not younger, similar age. His name is Muhammad Jubair. Quite apart from Alibur Chaudhry, who was in very regular contact with me to keep me misled in order to help Lutfur Rahman carry on lying. This was the only other person that was very much frequently in contact with me, either because he answered the phones or he answered the phone calls that I made to Lutfur or Alibur, or even to him, because of the fact that he had been present in a number of meetings that I had with Lutfur Rahman, or I had seen Lutfur Rahman at, for example, either at the restaurant called Marcos, in the basement of a restaurant called Marcos, situated in New Road, not far removed from my address, my home of long time in New Road. Not at the time, but on the day that was the 20th of September 2012. So Zubair would say to me, and there was a linguistic pattern to the use of references to Lutfur Rahman. He would not say, as the general custom goes inside the community, he would not say in Siloti, or the Siloti equivalent of what, brother Lutfur. That would be the most appropriate way to relate the two of them. He would not say the words brother Lutfur. He would say he. Now, when somebody says about another person, he or she, that spells out the relationship between those two people. The speaker who is refusing to name the person he referred to is, of course, either faking a locus, that is the relationship of being in awe of that person, because of the influence and the impact that person has on their life or their career, or they are in contempt of that person they are supposed to be referring to. Now, given all the facts of these circumstances, it is not conceivable that Muhammad Jubair was referring to Lutfur Rahman as he out of any contempt for Lutfur Rahman. So it was O. Whether the O was kind of feigned or actual doesn't matter. That was what he would say. So I would say the general pattern of my conversational substance being that I want to sit down with Lutfur Rahman and ask him the question. That is most regularly what I would say because of the things that were going on. And Muhammad Jubair would say, he has the highest regard for you. Now, anyone who can say they were going through the same kind of other multiplicity of physical challenges every day while this kind of conversation is going on, only anyone who can do that can understand the provocation in that report to me that I was being praised by Lutfur Rahman, highest praise. That was not why I wanted him to sit down with me and to do the things that he should have done by law and by other implications, which I'll be updating on. So he would say, or he would bring a cup of tea and say, I made a special kind of cup of tea for you. I wasn't there to be given any cup of tea or anything. And I also spoke to a policeman. There was a policeman, a commander, a policeman, Metropolitan Police in Tower Hamlets. If my memory serves, the man was called either Stringer or something like that, which attracted my attention because of the name. I mean, Stringer. I mean, this is a very, very uncommon name. But there he was. He was called that or similar spelling. Again, I said this subject to verification and subsequent kind of updating of the spelling. And it seemed that Stringer was positively disposed to Lutfur Rahman. He was not there. He was there as a policeman, but he was not there to police Lutfur Rahman, if you see the difference. So, fast forward now, and the current position is that there is no ongoing investigation, criminal investigation against Lutfur Rahman while he was in post of the mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets. That is the current position, official. And I would say that Lutfur Rahman was a complete stooge. He must have praised the police so much that the police knew they didn't have to do anything about anything. And he must have, Lutfur Rahman, prostrated before the image of the imperialists so completely and comprehensively that all the imperialists are now satisfied that he can be let off. That is why Lutfur Rahman says he didn't do any wrong, because he knows a number of police that would say that he didn't do anything wrong. But that's not the evidence out on the records. Because after Mori Mori's report and ruling on the 23rd of April 2015, Luther did make series of applications, to the court bureaucracy, seeking to have parts of Mori's findings overturned. To this day, there is no record that any of the applications by Luther has been successful in litigation terms in the courts. So that is proof that he did wrong, because the record of Mori's ruling is there. It has not been overturned whatsoever. That constitutes evidence, more rigorous evidence than anything. If I or another civilian, no matter how authentic, if we make a statement, officially it would not have the authority or similar authority as the ruling of a election commissioner would have, because that is how the system is. Now, Luther applied several times and he didn't succeed in getting any of the findings overturned. And the petitioners have not withdrawn any of their claims against him. Of course, they haven't. The petitioners haven't withdrawn any of their allegations and claims against Luther. None of the newspapers, Fleet Street, even they're liars, but Luther has claimed in the recent weeks that he has not done anything wrong. None of the newspapers that published, including The Guardian and The Independent, The Guardian has been on the record as supporting him throughout the 6 calendar years, but since he got kicked out, The Guardian could not conceal such an obvious kind of finding by the election commissioner. So The Guardian published the substance of what Mori's ruling contained. And Luther has not got The Guardian to publish a retraction. And it applies to all the other papers and the BBC. And Luther said he didn't do anything wrong while he was mayor. So the Solicitors' Disciplinary Tribunal, ruling on the prosecution of Luther brought by the Solicitors' Regulation Authority, unanimously found all the allegations against Luther made by the SRA proven. And as based on that finding, the Solicitors' Disciplinary Tribunal struck Luther off as a licensed solicitor. And Luther didn't attend the hearing. And Luther has not appealed the decision in any substantial way that I can find the evidence of. So Luther is either intellectually even more challenged now than he was before, or he's lying with the brazenness that he is doing in the knowledge that something or someone is helping him to perpetrate this denial, because something bigger is working for him, and that he will be elected mayor again. That is what it appears to be the case. Going back to the behavior of Muhammad Zubair, he said he praises you so much. Now, in my kind of campaigning and personal engagements with other human beings in various positions, I have been mostly kind of exercised to oppose wrongdoing and lying, and in doing so, I have incurred many people's logically understandable hostility, let's say. But nobody has, as far as I can recall, found anything selfish in me that I could be accused of. And I don't do things for personal gain. So it is not surprising that I would have been told this by other people as well about my character. Well, one who is on the record is, of course, a person that I tutored for 5-6 months in the Siloti language and linguistics. And he's a semi-academic, but he's a Christian kind of activist. And he wrote a pamphlet about linguistics based on my tutoring, although he didn't acknowledge it in full, but that is what it was. And that is what anyone can see it was, because all his other work about linguistics would show that he would not have known anything about the Siloti language without me. This is not a news item. This is actually fact. And some of my community-based students that he kind of got in touch with and has included in his list of people he has credited for his pamphlet. They had no idea about the linguistics of Siloti or anything else that I told him about. And that was in mid-1980s. 90s is 10 years. 20s is 20 years. And this is coming up to 30 years, nearly 30 years of the third decade. None of my former students has produced one piece of linguistic analysis since that time, while I'm doing linguistics every single day. So that shows that those of my students that he mentioned in elaborate terms, he did that in order to create what is called space filler. And the mention that he makes, which is about the selfishness and whatever, of me, is available online. Let's see if it is. So, his name is Greg Smith, anyone wants to know. And you can go online and check Greg Smith and quiz him about my assertions. I think Greg Smith is a missionary, and he has issues about being straightforward in acknowledging my work. So Greg Smith, in doing so, actually vindicated my analysis. That he too was racist. He may not agree because he is an evangelist man, but that is what he comes across as. But I shall read the main paragraph. there was a kind of den in the Institute of Education at the time, in the 1980s, in the Institute of Education in the University of London. And I shall come to the Institute of Education later, not this necessarily in this edition. Now, Greg Smith writes about me on page, what page is it? Page 3 of his thing, 99-page thing, under acknowledgements. And he says, Muhammad Haque in particular played a key role in articulating a radical challenge to traditional standards of thinking. Now, if meanness and reluctance to acknowledge the full breadth of the traditional thinking and the tutorials that I gave him for free over a few months, 5-6 months at least, then this is it. This is a very misleading summary of what I had given him. Then he says, over a period of many months, he does acknowledge many months, we spent many hours together discussing the background to and implications of the case study and more fundamental issues such as the institutional structures of the research establishment and the way that state resources are distributed in the definition, production, and control of knowledge. Now, no mention of racism, no mention of empire, no mention of Macaulay, no mention of ethics, morality, anything. And no mention of my denunciation of his tutor, who became an LSE lecturer, David Crystal, because Crystal's work I denounced. And Crystal is a racist, as he was Richard Hogarth, and so on. So what Smith is saying about me is mechanical, structure, etc. No humanity there. And he does not describe me like I was an input, mechanical tap that he kind of connected to, and I existed as a robot. Now, I invited this Greg Smith to a place in Brady Center, which is opposite the Montefiore Center, and the seminar that took place there in 1984-85, I think. Now, the reason I'm saying that, all of that, will become very clear shortly. Greg Smith was one of the speakers about Siloti language. And I invited him based on the strength of my tutoring of him. Because I could have invited somebody else, but I did invite him. Because I knew that he agreed, given the evidence that I put to him. And I didn't see this particular pamphlet then. Now, he spoke there, as did the crook Peter Newsom. Now, the crook Peter Newsom spoke on the same platform where Greg Smith spoke, and I was chairing the whole thing. Not a big deal. I have chaired literally hundreds of events, academic, thinking, scholarly, whatever, campaigning. And Newsom spoke at the session. Now, what was that year? 84, let's say. So 6-7 years later, in a piece by the Guardian's Sarah Bosley, who is now the health editor of the Guardian, this criminal, racist liar telephoned me and had a conversation with me on the telephone. Now, I shall run the whole thing later because I have to get the picture of the article so that I can diagnose it line by line. And she only called me because of the work I was doing as the organizer of the campaign in defense of the parents at the Stratford School, the Grand Maintenance School in the London Borough of Newham at the time, in January, February, March. I started in January and this was happening, I think, at end of February or early March. She published the piece in March, but she spoke to me a few days maybe before. And anyone who can read this will laugh. I mean, anyone reasonable person, sensible person, would have to laugh out loud. Because she starts by painting me as a hero in the in an R.K. Narayan book. And she ends up by collecting a collection of absolute racist liars she contracted to denounce me. I mean, you cannot be more stupid than that. I mean, a hero of an R.K. Narayan novel cannot be degenerated into that image that she managed. So when I say that I'm calling the racists, I'm not doing that lazily without any evidence. I'm at the center of all these activities. I didn't tell the Guardian to write a piece calling me the angry messiah of E1, which is what they did. I mean, I was not a messiah. I'm not a messiah. I am a fighting, campaigning, rights advocate of multiple disciplines and whatever. I'm doing what my great-grandfather did. He was a great philanthropist, educationist, and spiritual leader. I'm not claiming to be a spiritual leader, but I'm motivated by a lot of spirituality and ethics and morality. Now, just in context, remember we're talking about the liar, Lutfur Rahman, who has done serious damage to the community, to the humanity, and we shall be updating on all of those. People may think that Lutfur Rahman is just another local kind of council careerist, self-serving crook like Joe Anderson. But because of me, Lutfur Rahman got access to unprecedented resources for the benefit of the humanity and community. And his criminality and jealousy and his zeal combined to collaborate with the criminals, some of whom I have named and others I can name, and cause the damage that is unheard of in the history of human endeavors. I repeat, the damage that Lutfur Rahman has colluded and collaborated in doing is the damage that is unheard of in human history and human endeavors. Because it's all intellectual work, all evidence-based work, all truthful work, truth-seeking work, and work that I have done in the particular periods that nobody else could do and I cannot find the time to do again. Now, the lack of engagement with those concepts dominated the idiotic statement made by Muhammad Zubair to me. He praises you. I mean, the same thing Alibor Chaudhry said, but I didn't take any offense at Alibor saying it because he was at least telling me other things as well. So at least there was a justifiable framework to work within in terms of understanding why this liar was lying. When I said to George Galloway on the 6th of February 2010 that I would not give the microphone to him because I was leading the rally against the mayor system, I said, I'm not going to give you the microphone because I am leading the no campaign and you are going to say the yes to the mayor thing. That would not be compatible with what I'm here to do. I'm here to oppose. When I said that to Galloway, I had no idea what Galloway was going to say a few minutes later when he went inside the Brady Center. Because Galloway came and Ken Livingstone followed him, or Ken Livingstone came before and Galloway followed him. I mean, I cannot remember the sequence because I'm not looking at the video of the event of them coming in our demonstration. When Livingstone came, some of my side abused him, called him names very angrily. And I think one person spat at Ken Livingstone at that time. Now, I was surrounded by all kinds of supporters doing the no. So I could not physically reach that person who I saw kind of going for Ken Livingstone. I couldn't stop. But I would have stopped him out of general kind of decorum and courtesy, because I didn't want to do that to even the opponent. And when Galloway saw me with the loudhailer, he remembered me as the person who invited him to many platforms and rescued him from the disgrace of the Big Brother house aftermath, etc. But he misunderstood the purpose of the demonstration that I was leading there and the position that he had been kind of brought there to promote. The position that he had been brought there to promote was the position of somebody who didn't belong to the community locally and who had nothing to lose, even if he lost the argument, whatever. He was there on the list of people that didn't live in Tower Hamlets, didn't have anything to do with the community, and had never, ever lost anything to stick for any principle. Now, I'm the only person on the record that has been, if you like, constantly campaigning while being kind of attacked in terms of my home. So I have been forever, perennially homeless for 5 decades. Who else is there that has done that or has been doing this? Nobody. So I'm not challenging anybody to have that kind of excruciating experience, but that is the reality of my experience. And I would not be doing this, I would not be in this position if I was ever prepared, to sacrifice or give up the principles in return for something else. No way. Some of my very close personal friends, including Jane, that's all I would say, Jane, who was suggesting that I read newspapers and find the advertisements and look for a job. I never need to look for advertisements to get a job. Never had. But the fact that I did some, not when Jane was telling me to do that, but other times I did that. Not because I didn't know the alternative. That was just to create the evidence of what happens. Now, I had worked for national newspapers many years ago. And I worked for two established national dailies as part-time, as full-time journalist, except that I didn't get any money, not a single penny. I'm the only one on the planet Earth who has done this. And my writings were not commented on by me, but my rivals commented on my writings and rated them at the highest level, spontaneously. And that remains the case. I mean, when I do write the things that I want to write in terms of the contents. So all of those things I'm saying, because all the evidence of my work has been affected by the criminal behavior of Lutfur Rahman and his criminals in the council and the criminals he colluded with in the community. And Shamsur Rahman, Maulana Shamsul Haq, he went to the election court to give evidence in support of Lutfur Rahman and his integrity and his honesty. That is what Shamsul Haq went to the election commission sitting to give evidence for Lutfur Rahman. And what did the evidence concern? Maulana Shamsul Haq was told that he had delivered an illicit, illegal, corrupt sermon or edict or statement to the people that he addressed not long before the 22nd of May 2014 Tower Hamlets Council mayor election. At this stage, I cannot name the location, but that's not important. What is important is the actual substance of that encounter or exchange. So Maulana Shamsul Haq, who is, I mean, chronologically younger to me, but he looks older than me. He's got a huge white bush of beard and he has got the other gear around him. So he looks like maybe 90 years old, in comparison with me, but he's not older than me, he's younger than me. Anyway, he told the election court, which was cynically staged at the Royal Courts of Justice just for publicity, but that didn't alter the substance. Maulana Shamsul Haq was asked why he did that. Why did he lecture the kind of prayer goers or people who were Muslims and Bangladeshi Muslims and voters in the community to vote for Lutfur Rahman. And he said words to the effect that it was a religious duty, or words to that effect. I'm not quoting, I'm just paraphrasing. So he said that, to vote for Lutfur Rahman was a part of the religious duty in Islam. That is absolute, utter lies. Islam doesn't tell the voters to vote for anyone. It's not part of the faith. We're not going into the theological details, but that is not contained in the Islamic Sharia or whatever. And what the other party, the party putting the facts to Shamsul Haq, then did was, I wasn't present in the actual hearing because I've been too busy to travel there every day. So I relied on the reported kind of versions and the substance of the versions. So they had, the petitioner side had the kind of access to recording of what Shamsul Haq had actually done. So he was asked, did he disagree with the recording? Now, according to the reports, Shamsul Haq, when he first denied having said that, he did the denial on the assumption that there had not been any recording, number one, or on the assumption that if there were any recordings, the other side would not be having any access to the recordings. Something like that. So when the other side said to him that there is a recording, or when they showed the video, if that was a video, or played the audio, if there was an audio. As I said, I wasn't in the election court hearing. I wasn't present, so I didn't see the various sequences of the exchange. And astonishingly, Maulana Shamsul Haq said, if there was a recording of my saying what you say I said, then of course I must have said it. And there fell his entire evidence and integrity. Then there was the other witness, character witness, giving character references for Lutfur Rahman. Now, this was another criminal. Now, if I told anyone watching this at the time that Paula Munzila Uddin was a crook, and I had known and monitored her corruption since at least when she surfaced before me in 1983, if I told anyone before she became installed as a member of the House of Peers, people wouldn't believe me. And there is a very long record of people not believing me when I say things. Because I say things 10 years, 20 years ahead. And 10 or 20 years later, they are not only vindicated, but they're more than vindicated. So I said to some X or Y during the 1980s when Paula Munzila Uddin was being ferociously promoted by the Tower Hamlets racist crooks in the Labour Party. And whoever I would have said that to would not believe it. The same thing happened with the Trevor Terrible Phillips. I had met the criminal in the 1970s when he was being launched by his masters, his racist masters and mistresses. And nobody believed me that Trevor Terrible Phillips was being manufactured, installed to attack the community, which he has been doing now profitably and has been doing. So, Paula Munzila Uddin fell because when she gave a similar kind of character reference for Lutfur Rahman, whatever the words were, she praised Lutfur Rahman. And she was told by the other side that she was fined and she was caught lying and stealing under expenses in the House of Peers. She fell. Now, how could somebody like Lutfur Rahman even think of these two as character witnesses for him? Shows Lutfur was completely an idiot. How could he let these two appear as part of his community-based character certificate? Lutfur Rahman had no community base at all. I mean, he's too young to have had any community base in that time. And he was only introduced to the Labour Party, according to multiple sources, by Abbasuddin alias Halal. And Abbasuddin alias Halal himself had no real ground in the community, except to travel up the pole and make himself a career. Let me say this. You do not do campaign and have a career. No way. Well, truthfully, do not do campaigns and have careers. Never. Now, Lutfur Rahman did an extraordinary thing. This is the month, March or February. Either March 2014 or February 2014, not in 15. Because all these times that I had been trying to get him to sit down with me, and he has been dodging it. He eventually told a white woman who was acting as one of the staff of the so-called mayor's office. I'm not naming her for her data protection, but she's not involved in anything dodgy. So even if I mentioned her, it would not cause her any damage, but I won't. Only because of that, I won't mention her name. Unless I'm asked to do that as part of a court order or something. This woman told me, and I have a lot of time for her because of her consistent kind of statements, of authentic statements to me, as compared to the most of the council employees who are liars. So this woman said to me, that Mr. Haque, this one is real because he is actually keen to meet you, because he has said to many of us that cancel all the other things. This is the meeting I'm having with Mr. Haque. So I believed her, and it happened. I went along to have the meeting. But what Lutfur Rahman was doing, despite the fact that he was meeting me, he was also creating a number of exit routes in order to dodge his duties. Now, look at this. I'm a constitutional law expert, and I've been doing this since well before the biological birth of Lutfur Rahman. And I have challenged any kind of lawyers or whatever, QCs, and I have not lost to any of those criminals. My knowledge and my understanding has been proven to be higher and better than any of them. So this idiot had that meeting with me, but I was not there with a trick. I was there to help him solve the problem that the council had created by lying. But he was looking for tricks. So instead of having the head of the legal of the council present, and other people, directors of departments, etc., etc. He had 2 or 3 of the dodgiest elements from the community. These people had no locus. They had no standing in the council's behavior. And he got them there. Now that shows that despite the fact that this boy was a licensed solicitor, he didn't understand the law, basic law. Or he was a more ingrained liar. Either way, this meeting, which lasted, the pretense meeting, lasted for more than, I think, 2 hours, was another example of how unfit Luthvaraman was and how ignorant he was of the basic legal duties. And this is why, if he failed to safeguard the children, these 4 girls, schoolgirls, he would have done that because he was idiotic, and anyone else that he was kind of working with was an idiot as well. In addition to being negligent, because he relied on the monitoring officer Isabella Freeman, or the collection of liars that were imposed under Isabella Freeman. Anyone watching this must consider this as a world exclusive and keep checking the facts and the names and the descriptions I have given in this. One of the viewers has said in a message that I received a few weeks ago, well, about the time that the UK Supreme Court gave the rubber stamp ruling in favor of the Home Office and against Shamima Begum, that this is a lecture. Well, I can say quite clearly that this is not a lecture only. This is a combination of a lecture, a seminar, and a whole semester full of work. I have studied all the known university faculties and more, and I have read jurisprudence. There is nothing in a show of this description, because this is a very kind of moderately presented in terms of the context and the background. There is no glamour, there is no graphics and so on. Focus on the substance, and you will see that if you understand all of this, you will know that it's not accidental that the Labour Party or the so-called alternative to the Conservatives are not in power. Every single stage of the elected kind of post holders is occupied by morons or liars or worse. So this is the crisis. This is the shape of the crisis. What I'm describing here and updating on is a very serious crisis. My work encompasses wider range of thoughts and action plans than are available in principle in all the agencies of the United Nations organization. Now, anyone who disputes that or thinks that I'm kind of promoting myself, let me say to them, I don't need to promote myself. I need to assert the truth of what is going on in the world. And this diagnostic discussion is as truthful as you can find anywhere. If you disagree, as I say, send a direct message with chapter and verse. Where you disagree, on what evidence do you disagree, and who can you cite other than me to deny or disprove what I'm saying, that there is no other program, presentation, or channel that is doing, not only not doing the same thing, not even doing a small part of what we are doing, because the whole agenda, the narrative, the diagnostic approach is very, very unique. And the world needs more of this. Fans of the American linguist, you know who the linguist is, don't you? Let me just tell you about this linguist. He has not read the papers, Fleet Street papers, ever in the way that I have done. And he hasn't done the counterparts published in the USA. And I challenge anyone to dispute my diagnosis of Fleet Street today or of any day on the contents, on the facts, on the context. The world is in a dark place. And the darkness is everywhere. There are facades. I mean, Brenda, the queen, says that recollections by Meghan may vary, that may be true about some things. When it comes to the substance of racist environment, hostility, and prejudice and spite in the household that Brenda fronts, there is no variation. I mean, until the time that Meghan Markle entered this family, there has been no sign, there is no trace of a black person there. I mean, she is mixed race and she is not, as George Galloway said about Una King. I mean, Meghan Markle is not physically black skinned, is she? So George Galloway told Jeremy Paxman on Newsnight that Una King was not really black because Tony Bonkers, who is no longer around, Tony Bonkers, the MP for West Ham at the time, had said, as Paxman relayed him, that George Galloway had defeated or put out of her post a black woman. Did it make him feel better? And Galloway came back correctly that Una King was not black. Well, biologically, Una King has the father who is an African origin person, but her mother is Jewish white person. Quite apart from that, Una King would look similar to Meghan Markle in terms of pigmentation. And the fact that Una King was able to invent a career or series of careers by approximately exploiting the blackness gives away the game, because a person with a genuine black skin would not get the preferential treatment, even 10% of the preferential treatment that Una King receives. And that is to do with her nearness to looking white than her nearness to looking black. Now, the royal family, so-called, is a white family, has been so for centuries. And Brenda, that is Queen Elizabeth II, has never issued one single statement, one single gossip, or one single aside against racism, against empire, against imperialism. All these riots and all these racist murders and the racist attacks that have been going on in this country have been ignored by Brenda. So her annus horribilis was a reluctant admission, still linguistically playing the in denial role, annus horribilis. Why couldn't she say it in English? My horrible year. Why couldn't she say that? Because that would actually transform Brenda into a human being, which she didn't want to appear as. People's Queen? How dare the liars call her the People's Queen? Mother of Parliament, mother of democracy. What a load of nonsense. When the BlackRock, the asset strippers and asset manipulators of the world, stripping and robbing, manipulating and hiding and transforming and transferring assets worth billions, trillions of dollars. They announced a czar, a diversity czar, just like Brenda has done. I mean, instead of admitting that the Arab Muslim young woman who was born and brought up in the USA, Esma Bengapsia, was telling the truth, and they should apologize to her, and they apologize to the Kenyan black man who also spoke out against being abused and racistly exploited as diversity token. They have gone on the attack by denying. Brenda has gone on the attack by denying. And Tower Hamlets Council, while it was lumbered with an elected mayor post holder in the shape of Lutfur Rahman, during the 6 calendar years, these children, these girls, they were in the secondary school for most of the duration of Lutfur Rahman's stay in that post. As I have outlined and summarized, if Lutfur Rahman were intelligent, these girls would not have been allowed to be hijacked by the groomers or whoever. Because every child's welfare would have been safeguarded if they were alert. If the council was alert in delivering and adhering to its duties to safeguard children. Now, let me just say the difference. If somebody like me, let's say, makes a noise, then I do make the noise in the language, in the vocabulary, in the narrative, in the rhetoric of the ones that I'm campaigning against the behavior of, etc., etc. And I have been doing this for a very long time, and I've been doing this motivated by the spiritual and moral commitment and legacy of the spiritual leader my great grandfather was. Now, the likes of me are not available in every part or on every issue. And the criminals in posts have got the number on their side. There are many. And outside, a campaigner of my kind of description has to mobilize a slumberous many. That is a logistical reality. And any campaigner against racism in this country, any campaigner against racism in this country has to do extraordinary level, quality, and continuity and consistency of the work, because racism is the norm and it is getting worse. And in order to break the norm, you have to know the norm and its ordinary kind of factors. And then you have to put it against the extraordinary duties it owes to the victims of racism. That requires sheer slog, which is why you need the evidence. Why am I doing the diagnosis of the Fleet Street papers? Because they are the kind of platforms, they are the couriers that carry the message and take it to the gullibles, 52% or whatever. It's a very arduous task. The task that would need about 20 persons to do the same job that I have been doing. Multiple types of work. So if I were to quote a scene from a film, India South film, if I were doing the same running, as the actor called Darshan said, then I would be winning Olympic medals every time. Think about that. That is the arduous nature and the extent of the work that you have to do. So when I told Lutfur Rahman that he should listen to me, I don't believe that he could understand, or he did understand, that he would be branded as he has been branded now. He can never undo this. Absolutely never. Because when Channel 4 television did a few minutes of him, I mean, his house is opposite. The main house is just opposite the East London Mosque in Whitechapel Road. And if he crosses the road, it would take him literally 7 minutes to get to his house in the old Montague Street. And yet Channel 4 filmed him using a council-paid or public-paid expensive car or vehicle to transfer his laundry. I mean, he never needed a laundry to be transferred and transported like that until he became incumbent in the post where he was controlling £1 billion plus pound worth of a budget. And it was that money that he was abusing. It wasn't his money, it was abusing the council's money, as the Channel 4 short documentary showed. This is the work of an idiot. Because Tower Hamlets, as even Una King had to acknowledge in June 1997, 98, when she gave the question to Tony Blair during Prime Minister's questions. And our question started with the reference to the index on poverty at the time in vogue. It has been replaced since 1998. I think German index, JERMAN or JARMAN. We can check the spelling. It's a German index. She said boastfully, she should not have been boasting, but she did. Another idiot. She said that according to the German index, she represents one of the country's poorest boroughs. It's just like Sarah Bosley praising me as the angry messiah of E1 who could have been or could be or was like a hero in a R.K. Narayan novel or book or something, and then degenerated into describing me as somebody who had issues with the Commission for Racist Enslavement. She didn't say enslavement, but I'm saying it. And I have been saying it right from the start of the enslavement in April 1997. So I'm the constant factor against all these crooks. I was present in April 1997 at the launch of the Commission for Racist Enslavement, launched by a conservative ex-MP, David Lane. And I asked him questions he could not really answer. He resorted to tautological idiocies, just like Morarji Desai, one of India's prime ministers, did during the same year when I asked him questions during a press conference held at the India House in the Strand. So when I said diagnosing the media, you have to look at the unique depth of evidential, empirical contents in the diagnosis. So Lutfur Rahman was in post as mayor and abusing the 1.5 billion pound budget's strength. And 10 years or so previously, 12 years or so, Una King had boasted to Tony Blair that she represented one of England's or one of the UK's poorest boroughs. Now, anyone who starts by saying poorest boroughs logically should go on to show how poverty should be tackled and how poverty should be ended and how poverty is created. That should be one of the foremost topics in any discussion that follows that kind of preface in a question or a preamble, so-called. And yet she degenerated. She said, I represent one of the poorest boroughs. And then she says to Tony Blair, as a completely shameless absolutely disgraceful. I'm not even saying the word, whatever it is not a pleasant word. To be liar, saying, will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating the local Tower Hamlets Council for reducing the housing waiting list by 10%? Now, anyone who knows basic numbers, I mean, reducing 10% of a bad thing is not worth mentioning. It is not even reducing. And anyone who knows about the realities of destructions of lives that happen when you haven't got a home, would never accept that as an achievement. As we shall be discussing at length in the due course, I mean, our campaign, my campaign, have been subjected to endless uncertainties. By definition, I'm not supposed to do the campaigns when I'm in need of proper, secure housing. So how do you reconcile the two? The campaign is not a career option. So you can't wait and make deals and then campaign. It doesn't work. Campaign is actually correctly called justice. You can't campaign and fight for justice while you are making deals, and making deals essentially involve giving up principles. And so when Lutfur Rahman was using the expensive vehicle to travel only a fraction of a mile of distance between the laundrette or laundry place, wherever they showed the kind of vehicle traveling from, Lutfur Rahman was behaving in total, utter, absolute, disgraceful sleep. He was not awake. What am I saying now is not just me saying these things about him. I'm not accusing him of anything that is not factual. I'm being restrained and reserved and kind and generous, even when I call him a liar and an idiot and a crook. He praised me in front of Jubair and Alibor Chaudhry. I didn't need his praise. I foresaw and I could foresee way ahead of his praising me. He said to me on the 20th of September 2012 that you, that is me, should have been the MP, not anybody else. Then he said, he should have been the mayor, not me. Now he overlooked the little fact that I was opposed to the mayor system, and I still am. It didn't occur to him that I had been the main opponent against the mayor system. It doesn't show that he's fit for purpose. And there are lists of things. So he did wrong, and the mayor system must go. And people in Tower Hamlets must vote no on the 6th of May this year. If they don't, let me give a clear as possible, then the damage that Lutfur Rahman has done would be multiplied many times over by the next mayor, whoever. I cannot give the actual date and chapter and verse of what will happen. All I know is that there will be damages that will really harm the collective community interests and rights. And it will not serve the ordinary population of the borough at all. I mean, today's news from Liverpool, Friday's news, that is, we are already into Saturday. So Friday's news from Liverpool showed that the son of Joe Anderson owned a company, and its linked person or personnel were given a contract without any kind of checks or any tender or anything. Now, Luther Rahman did a number of business. He signed a lot of decisions. That, to put it mildly, were dodgy. And no councillor from any background in Tower Hamlets, since the council was created in April 1965, no councillor, elected councillor, had been caught doing anything, the fraction of anything that Luther Rahman did. And just like the Pakistani-born gangs of rapists and groomers of white girls were allowed to do their crimes without the Pakistani community coming out publicly against them, so is the Bangladeshi community. None of the Bangladeshi community organizations in Tower Hamlets has condemned Luther Rahman publicly. Publicly, that is. And that shows serious alarm, because there will be similar wrongdoings by the next mayor, and the community would be absent. That is the danger, because the community won't hold him to account. For example, when these 4 girls disappeared, and I'm using a rhetoric that is simply chosen because of the ease of communication. I mean, going to Syria and radical, this is not immediately understandable. People cannot relate to these things. But if you say that these girls were hijacked or kidnapped, it's much easier, just for understanding. Just as a rhetorical device, I'm not replacing those as evidence. So what happened? These girls were aged 10 up to, say, 14, 15 by February 2015. And they were targeted during those 6 years. I have asked repeatedly, where is any reference in the council's meetings in those years where it refers to safeguarding children in the context of what is going on in the world and what the news is saying, what children are likely to be kind of lured to? Because when the internet and mobile telephoning system became wider in accessibility, the frequency and the possibility of children getting snared increased tremendously. And any intelligent kind of authority or agency that is duty bound to safeguard the children would have instantly clicked and clocked and engaged. There is no evidence that Hrs Council did any of that. So the questions will continue.